On a quiet afternoon in the park, a police officer hurled baseless accusations and abused his authority to demean a young woman and her niece. What he didn't know, however, was that this woman was an FBI agent, someone who understood the law better than most. This story isn't just about how she confronted injustice, but also about breaking stereotypes and reclaiming dignity in a tense situation. Can truth triumph over abuse of power? Can courage light the path to justice? Follow this story to the end to discover how she handled the situation with strength and determination. It was supposed to be a peaceful afternoon, a simple day at the park with her young niece, nothing more. Rachel Lawson, an experienced FBI agent deeply committed to both her job and her family, was savoring a rare moment of relaxation, sitting on a bench with her 7-year-old niece, Lily. She laughed heartily at the child's innocent jokes, enjoying the serenity around them. Everything seemed perfect until Rachel noticed him. Officer Jason Ward, tall and broad-framed, stood at a distance, staring intently. His gaze wasn't casual, it carried a hostile edge, as if Rachel and Lily's mere presence in the park was somehow wrong. Jason didn't approach immediately. He stood there, assessing Rachel from afar, narrowing his eyes whenever she smiled at Lily. It was as though he was constructing a narrative in his head, a story based solely on prejudice and assumptions. Rachel felt the sharpness of Jason's stare before she even saw him. A faint sense of unease crept into her mind, but she brushed it aside, choosing instead to focus on the joyful moments with Lily. She refused to let an unfriendly gaze ruin their peaceful day. But the atmosphere changed suddenly. Without warning, Jason closed the distance between them in just a few long strides, towering over Rachel and Lily. He cast a shadow that felt as oppressive as his presence. His cold, unforgiving eyes revealed a simmering anger that couldn't be ignored. Lily, innocent and carefree, looked up at the officer with wide, curious eyes, unable to understand why he seemed so displeased. Rachel, relying on her training and experience, knew this encounter wasn't going to be a simple conversation. Jason broke the silence, his voice rigid, each word laced with authority intended to intimidate. "What's your reason for being here and disturbing the peace?" His tone was more accusatory than questioning. Rachel lifted her head, meeting his gaze with calm determination. Inside, a quiet anger began to brew, but she kept her composure. Parks were meant for everyone, a place for children to play and adults to enjoy a moment of tranquility amidst the city's chaos. But to Jason, Rachel and Lily's presence was enough to warrant suspicion. Lily gently tugged at Rachel's sleeve, her wide eyes betraying her unease. Rachel squeezed her niece's hand tightly, never breaking eye contact with Jason as she responded in a steady voice. "I'm here with my niece, simply enjoying the afternoon. Is that a problem, officer?" Jason let out a derisive laugh, his lips curling into a mocking smile. Crossing his arms, he leaned in closer, as if to assert his physical dominance. "You think you can talk to me like that?" he sneered. "People like you always think you're above the law. I know your type." His words landed like a slap, laden with prejudice and dripping with contempt built over years. "This park isn't for people like you," he added, his voice low but seething with menace. Lily clung to Rachel's arm, her small hand trembling as she instinctively sought safety. Though she didn't fully grasp the situation, she could sense the tension and hostility emanating from the man before them. Rachel took a deep breath, holding back her growing frustration. She knew Jason was trying to provoke her, to push her into reacting in a way that would justify his aggression. But Rachel wasn't one to back down easily. "I'm teaching my niece that we all have a right to be here," she replied, her voice steady and firm, "and that we all deserve respect, no matter who we are." Jason let out a loud, mocking laugh, his voice echoing through the quiet park. He leaned in even closer, his tone colder and more threatening than ever. "You think you deserve respect? People like you need to learn how to earn it. It's not just given." Rachel's gaze remained unwavering. She knew she couldn't retreat, not for herself, but for Lily. She couldn't let her niece grow up thinking it was acceptable to stay silent in the face of injustice. Jason continued to glare at Rachel with piercing eyes, as if her very presence was a personal affront to him. Crossing his arms, his posture exuded arrogance, and his voice carried a tone thick with condescension. "You think you can just show up anywhere and behave like this?" he spat, not attempting to hide his disdain. "This park isn't a place for you to cause trouble. People like you should know better." Rachel didn't respond immediately. She felt Lily's small hand clutching hers tighter. The child's wide eyes filled with confusion and worry. A surge of emotion rose within Rachel, not fear, but a smoldering anger. Memories from her past came flooding back, bringing with them a familiar ache. She remembered being a young girl when her father, a kind and dignified man, was stopped by a police officer much like Jason. That officer hadn't needed any concrete reason to belittle her father. The look in her father's eyes remained etched in her memory, a mix of pain, helplessness, and determination not to let his family see him crumble. "No, my daughter," her father had said then, his voice deep but steady. "We never bow to injustice. You must always remember that." That memory now ignited a fire within Rachel, stealing her resolve. She met Jason's gaze head-on, her voice calm yet firm. "I'm here to spend time with my niece. We're not causing any trouble. If you have a problem, I suggest you take a closer look at your real reasons for being here." Jason narrowed his eyes, taking another step closer, closing the distance between them until there was almost no space left. "Are you trying to provoke me?" he challenged, his voice low and menacing. "Do you even know who you're talking to?" Lily, though young, was perceptive enough to sense the tension. Quietly, she let go of Rachel's hand and took a small step back. From her pocket, she carefully pulled out her phone, her small fingers trembling slightly as she began recording. Though her hands shook, Lily held the phone steady, silently capturing every word and action. Jason wasn't aware of Lily's actions as he pressed on, his voice growing louder, drowning out the distant laughter of children playing nearby. "You think you're special, don't you? I see people like you every day, always thinking you're above the law. But let me tell you something, here, I am the law." Rachel took a deep breath, willing herself to remain composed. Her gaze briefly flickered to Lily, and she saw the determination in her niece's young eyes as she continued recording. The sight filled Rachel with a deep sense of responsibility, not just to protect herself, but to set an example for Lily about standing up to injustice. "You're harassing me and my niece," Rachel said, her voice now sharper and more resolute. "We've done nothing wrong. This is a public park. If you're serious about maintaining order, maybe you should start by respecting others." For a brief moment, her words seemed to catch Jason off guard, but he quickly masked his hesitation with a sneer and laugh, shaking his head dismissively. "Respect? You think you deserve respect?" he mocked, his tone dripping with derision. Lily remained focused, her phone capturing every sneer and every hostile gesture. She didn't fully understand the weight of the situation, but she instinctively knew that what she was doing mattered. For Rachel, the memory of her father's words burned brightly in her mind. They gave her strength now as she stood firm in the face of Jason's hostility. She refused to let him intimidate her. She refused to let Lily witness the same kind of humiliation she had seen as a child. "Yes," Rachel said, her voice unwavering, her eyes locked on Jason's. "Everyone deserves respect, even people like you." Jason stepped back slightly, his piercing eyes still brimming with defiance. But instead of stopping, he abruptly reached out and grabbed Rachel's arm, yanking her toward him with unnecessary force. "Enough," Jason growled, his cold gaze pressing down on her like a weight. "You're coming with me. Maybe a night in jail will teach you how to behave properly." Lily screamed, her small voice piercing through the quiet of the park as everything seemed to pause. "Let go of Aunt Rachel. She didn't do anything wrong." The little girl rushed forward, clutching Rachel's leg tightly, tears streaming down her face. Rachel felt Lily's trembling body, and it only strengthened her resolve to stay calm. Turning to Jason, her eyes burned with determination as she said, "Officer Ward, you're abusing your power. This action isn't just wrong. It's far beyond your authority." Jason raised an eyebrow, a mocking smile creeping onto his face. "Abusing my power?" Who do you think you are to speak to me like that? Rachel didn't respond immediately. She took a deep breath, her mind racing as she assessed the situation. As an FBI agent, she had been trained to handle high-pressure encounters, and she knew that remaining calm was her greatest weapon. "You're very angry," Rachel said, her voice so calm that Jason hesitated for a moment. "I can see it in the way you're gripping my arm. Is it because I'm not submitting to you? Is it because you feel the need to prove you're stronger?" Jason frowned, confusion flickering across his face. "What are you even talking about?" he snapped. "You're trying to control the situation, but in reality, you're losing control." Rachel continued, her voice steady, as if stating an undeniable truth. "I'm not your enemy, but you're trying to turn me into one." "Why, Officer Ward? What are you trying to prove? And to whom?" Her calm yet piercing words cut through Jason's confident facade like a blade. For a moment, he blinked, his grip on her arm loosening slightly as his mind scrambled to process her pointed observations. Lily, still clinging to Rachel's leg, shouted again, her small voice filled with anger and fear. "You can't do this to my aunt. We didn't do anything wrong." Lily's outburst acted like a wake-up call. A few people in the park had started to take notice of the commotion, their curious and concerned gazes turning toward the unfolding scene. Rachel realized that the moment to shift the power dynamics had arrived. "You're trying to prove you have power," she said, her eyes never leaving Jason's. "But true power isn't about imposing your will. True power is knowing when to stop." Jason clenched his jaw, his expression shifting from anger to visible uncertainty. She had hit a nerve, exposing a deeper insecurity within him. "You think no one's watching," Rachel continued, her voice growing firmer. "But you're wrong. People are watching you now, not just here, but beyond this park." Jason's brows furrowed, confusion and unease written across his face. In that instant, Rachel knew she had gained the upper hand. "Lily," Rachel said gently, "give me your phone." Lily hesitated, her small hands shaking, but she obeyed. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out the phone and handed it to Rachel, whispering, "You can use this to show him you're right." Rachel gave her niece a reassuring smile before holding the phone up in front of Jason. "You think no one will know about this?" Rachel said, her tone sharper now. "But every single one of your actions has been recorded, and I'll make sure this footage is used to reveal the truth." Jason froze, his face flushing red as if caught between anger and fear. Before he could respond, another commanding voice cut through the tension. "That's enough, Ward." Both Rachel and Jason turned to see a tall man in a sharp suit walking toward them with an air of authority that was impossible to ignore. It was Special Agent Chris Daniels, Rachel's longtime colleague and fellow FBI agent. Chris approached, his piercing gaze fixed on Jason as if he had pieced together the entire situation from a single glance. "Ward, you've just made the biggest mistake of your career," Chris said, his tone calm but laced with undeniable authority. He gestured to a small device on his lapel. "It's all been recorded, and not just by the girl." Lily peeked out from behind Rachel, clutching her phone tightly. Her eyes glimmered with a mix of relief and determination as she saw Chris arrive. "Agent Daniels," Jason stammered, his once confident voice now trembling. This is a misunderstanding. I didn't mean." Chris raised a hand, cutting him off. "A misunderstanding?" Interesting choice of words, coming from someone with a history of complaints for abuse of power. "Don't bother making excuses, Ward. No one's covering for you this time." Jason opened his mouth as if to protest, but no sound came out. His confidence had crumbled entirely. Rachel's gaze never wavered as she addressed Jason once more. "I've faced people like you throughout my career, people who think that the badge on their chest grants them unlimited power. But you're wrong. True power comes from protecting and respecting others, not from intimidating them." Chris nodded in agreement. "Ward, you've used your badge to bully and harm the people you were sworn to protect. Now you'll answer for all of it." Jason staggered back a step, his face pale. He had been reprimanded before for similar behavior, but his superiors had always shielded him. This time, there was no one left to save him. Rachel knelt, and placed her hands gently on Lily's shoulders. "You were amazing. Lily, you're so brave." Lily smiled shakily, her eyes still reflecting the intensity of the moment. "You're going to fix this, right, Aunt Rachel?" Rachel nodded, standing tall and turning to Chris. "It's time for justice to be served." Chris gave her a resolute nod. "Don't worry, Rachel. Ward won't escape the consequences this time." Jason stood there, his breathing ragged, as if the entire world was closing in on him. His face was etched with despair and fear, and the confident demeanor he usually wore was now completely shattered. Rachel's voice sliced through the tension like a knife. "This time, Ward, there's nowhere left for you to run." Those words echoed in Jason's mind, a grim confirmation that everything had come to an end. His lips moved faintly, perhaps in an attempt at a feeble excuse. But deep down, he knew no one here would believe him anymore. Not Rachel, not Chris, and certainly not the curious onlookers whose piercing gazes seemed to strip him bare. From a distance, Chris signaled to a group of internal affairs officers. They moved swiftly toward Jason, surrounding him. The heavy sound of their footsteps drove home the reality that there was no escape this time. The clinking of handcuffs made Jason shudder, and every step the officers took pushed him closer to the truth he could